The Secret of the V-2, From Strikes on London to NASA. London, late 1944. A thunderous explosion erupts out of nowhere, shattering a quiet neighborhood. There was no air raid siren this time, no warning at all. In an instant, houses are reduced to rubble and flames. Panicked survivors look to the sky, confused. What kind of attack strikes without any hint? It wasn't dropped from a plane. It was something new and terrifying. The Nazi V-2 rocket. The V-2 was the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a 46-foot rocket. It shot into the upper atmosphere and then plunged down at over 3 times the speed of sound. By the time you heard its sonic boom or felt the blast, it was already too late. Each V-2 carried a 1-ton warhead, enough to obliterate a city block. For Londoners who had endured years of bombing, this weapon was a nightmare made real, a silent killer raining down from the stratosphere. Adolf Hitler hailed the V-2 as a Vergeltungswaffe, a vengeance weapon, a last-ditch reprisal for the Allies' bombardment of German cities. By 1944, with the Nazi war effort crumbling, Hitler was desperate for a Wunderwaffe, a wonder weapon to turn the tide. He had already tried the V-1 flying bomb, which the British nicknamed the Buzz Bomb. But the V-1 had an engine you could hear coming and could be shot down. The V-2 was his next gamble, a weapon that enemies couldn't stop or even see coming. Developed in absolute secrecy, it was meant to crush civilian morale and show off German technological might, even as the Reich was on the brink of defeat. The mastermind behind the V-2 was a brilliant German engineer, 32-year-old Wernher von Braun. At a hidden research base in Peenemünde on the Baltic Sea, von Braun and his team had been working on rocket technology for the German army. In October 1942, they successfully launched a prototype that soared nearly into space. This success convinced Hitler to fund the project at full throttle. Soon, factories were churning out V-2s for deployment. That production came at a horrific human cost. After Allied bombers hit Peenemünde in 1943, the Nazis moved V-2 manufacturing underground to a facility called Mittelwerk. There, thousands of concentration camp prisoners were forced to assemble rockets in brutal conditions. Starved, beaten, and worked to death, more people died building the V-2 than were killed by it as a weapon. It was cutting-edge science built on an appalling foundation of human suffering. In September 1944, the V-2 campaign began. London was among the first targets. Residents were stunned by explosions that struck without warning. Initially, some thought gas mains had blown up because no enemy aircraft were heard. Within months, over 500 V-2s slammed into Greater London. One rocket obliterated a department store full of shoppers, killing 160 people in an instant. There was simply no time to seek shelter, no pattern to anticipate. Even Winston Churchill confessed that the constant fear caused by the V-2 was worse on morale than the Blitz had been. Day or night, clear skies or cloudy, an attack could come at any moment. By early 1945, roughly 9,000 people had been killed by V-2 strikes across Britain, Belgium, and elsewhere. The destruction was horrifying, yet in strictly military terms, the V-2's impact was not enough to alter the outcome of the war. It was a weapon of terror, inflicting fear and death, but it could not stop the Allied armies advancing on Germany. Because the V-2 was impossible to intercept, the Allies had to find other ways to counter it. British intelligence used deception to throw off the rocket's aim, feeding false reports to Germany about where V-2s were hitting, so the launch crews would adjust their targeting incorrectly. And as Allied troops pushed toward Germany, they quickly overran the V-2 launch sites. In March 1945, Allied forces seized the last active launch areas in the Netherlands, finally silencing the attacks. Hitler's much-hyped wonder weapon had failed to save him from defeat. With the war in Europe ending, the race was on to grab the V-2's secrets. The victorious powers realized this rocket technology would be crucial for the future. Allied teams scoured Germany for missiles, parts, and documents. In the wreckage of factories and laboratories, they found dismantled V-2s and stacks of blueprints. The Soviet Union and the Western Allies each wanted a share of this technological treasure and the brains that created it. The most valuable prize was Wernher von Braun and his engineering team. They willingly surrendered to America American soldiers, preferring the Americans over the Soviets. The U.S. Army, recognizing their expertise, whisked von Braun and his men out of Europe before the Soviets could get to them. Under a secret plan codenamed Operation Paperclip, dozens of these German scientists were brought to the United States. It was a controversial move. These men had worked for Hitler's regime, but with the Cold War looming, America was eager to secure their knowledge for itself. Soon, captured V-2 rockets and their former German operators were hard at work on American soil. At the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, U.S. engineers, alongside von Braun's team, began test launching V-2s to understand their design. The same rockets that once terrorized London now carried scientific instruments high into the atmosphere. In fact, one such launch in 1946 even took the first ever photograph of Earth from the edge of space. Meanwhile, von Braun and his colleagues started developing new rockets for the U.S. Army, applying what they had learned to America's own missile program. Their expertise quickly paid off. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first satellite, sparking an urgent space race. The United States answered by launching its own satellite, Explorer 1, in January 1958, using a rocket designed by von Braun's team. Later that year, the U.S. formed NASA, a new space agency, and von Braun and his German scientists were at its heart. In Huntsville, Alabama, they began work on the Saturn V, a gigantic rocket built on the principles of the V-2, but vastly more powerful. Less than 25 years after the V-2's first strike on London, its descendants carried humankind to the moon. In July 1969, a Saturn V rocket designed by Wernher von Braun's team launched Apollo 11 on its historic journey. It's a profound historical irony. The technology that once served war and destruction had been transformed into the vehicle that enabled humanity's greatest leap. The V-2 was the direct ancestor of the Saturn V. Step by step, the knowledge from Hitler's deadly weapon had helped America achieve a triumphant feat of exploration. The saga of the V-2 rocket is a remarkable tale of innovation and moral compromise. It began as a weapon of vengeance and terror, and ended by paving the way to space. But that transformation came with ethical trade-offs. The United States gained immensely from the V-2's technology and the talents of its creators. But it also meant forgiving the past of men who had built weapons for the Nazi war machine. This legacy leaves us with tough questions. Do the ends justify the means? Can great achievements be separated from the dark context in which they were born? So, what do you think about this journey? From the ruins of war to the heights of space, was bringing Nazi scientists like von Braun to America a necessary evil to propel the nation into the space age and win the Cold War? Or should the moral cost have given us pause? It's a complex chapter of history that still sparks debate. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.